Welcome back. You're watching Vaticano. The Feast of All Saints on November the 1st is followed the next day by the Feast of All Souls. It's the time when people visit cemeteries and pray for their dead relatives. Christian tradition says that life after death is divided into 3 dimensions. Hell, the place for people who have rejected God. Heaven for those who are in friendship with God. And then purgatory. But what is this place called purgatory? To discover that, we met up with Father John Wauck, professor of literature and communication of the faith, to discover how purgatory began being represented.
The tradition of purgatory is based on above all, on texts in the Bible, in the Old Testament, and then also in the writings of the early church fathers about prayers for the dead, about the value of praying for the dead. And that's a very ancient, or the very first Christians talk about praying for the souls of those who have died. And it only makes sense to pray for the souls who have died if you can do some good for them, right? If they were in hell, you couldn't, and if they're in heaven, they don't need your help.
The Church of the Sacred Heart of Suffrage is a very particular church. It's the only church in Rome built in the neo-Gothic style. But what makes it really special is a small room located next to the sacristy. It's a small museum of the Holy Souls of Purgatory.
The church doesn't have any official teaching about whether souls of purgatory can visit the earth, but there are witnesses who have testified to that happening, that a soul from purgatory has come and asked for prayers, for instance, and even left, say, a fingerprint or burned a page of a book or something. There's physical evidence that they claim came from a soul in purgatory.
The museum contains around 15 testimonies and artifacts collected from around Europe by Father Victor Jouët, a French priest. In many of the cases, it's held that the marks were left as proof that the deceased had really appeared, asking for prayers for masses to be said for their soul's sake. Father Andrea is a member of the Missionaries of the Sacred Heart, the community that's in charge of this church and the museum.
Nel 1895 da un nostro confratello.
This church was built in 1895 by one of our fellow brothers, one of the first members of our congregation, Father Jouët, who believed in the souls of purgatory. He would always spur people to pray in suffrage of these souls.
E che spronava sempre le persone a pregare per il suffragio di queste anime.
The idea for the construction of the museum also came from Father Jouët. The original chapel before the construction of this beautiful church was dedicated to the souls of purgatory as well. It had an icon of Holy Mary holding a rosary in one of her hands with the souls of purgatory below. When this original chapel caught fire, the icon survived, and on the left-hand side of the wall, the scorched image of a man appeared, which the faithful believed to be a trapped soul.
Praticamente la parte che è stata di muro della cappella, che poi è stata integrata all'interno del...
This is a part of the original chapel later incorporated into the walls of the church. And here you can see a suffering face. It's nearly all faded. You can see the eye on this face, and it is, if you will, suffering. And this very same face is found inside the museum, in its original colors.
L'immagine dipinta che c'è all'interno del piccolo museo, proprio perché lo richiama con gli stessi colori come è stato ritrovato dopo l'incendio.
Spurred on by this occurrence, Father Jouët started to travel around Italy and Europe in search of these many artifacts that would demonstrate to people the existence of purgatory. The collection thus gathered is kept in one room near the sacristy of the Church of the Sacred Heart of Suffrage. Here are many documents and photos that attest to the supernatural manifestations of the souls of the dead. Among these relics are a prayer book with an alleged handprint on one of its pages, a pillowcase branded by the soul of a nun who died of consumption in 1984, and who later appeared to another nun to convince her to pray for her soul's sake. And there are many others, including the traces left by the passage of a dead woman on the cap of her widowed husband in 1875.
Praticamente questa donna apparve al marito
Basically, this woman appeared to her husband and asked him to pray in suffrage of her soul, because she said she was in this situation of suffering, not able to leave purgatory.
Di sofferenza perché non riusciva a uscire dal purgatorio, chiede preghiera.
These fingerprints on the prayer book of Maria Zaganti of the parish of St. Andrew in Poggio Berni in Italy were left by the deceased Palmira Rastelli, the parish priest's sister, on March the 5th, 1871. Palmira Rastelli, who had died on the 28th of December 1870, asked her brother Don Sante Rastelli, by means of her friend, for some holy masses.
Artistic representations of purgatory have been various. Sometimes it's presented as fire, and the theologians have also talked about the fires of purgatory. But the most famous representation of purgatory in art is Dante's Purgatorio. In the Divine Comedy, which is divided into three parts, the Inferno for hell, the Paradiso for heaven, and then Purgatorio, which is purgatory. And Dante doesn't represent it as fire at all. In fact, in the Dante's version of Purgatorio, it's a mountain. And it's a mountain on the other side of the world. From the inhabited part of the world, it's on the opposite side of the world. And it has 7 levels, terraces, that correspond to the 7 capital sins.
There's a painting behind the altar of the Church of the Sacred Heart of Suffrage, and it represents the 3 dimensions of the Church.
The Catholic Church has always understood itself to be divided in 3 parts, right? There's the Church militant, which is the Church on earth, those who are in life, right? And then there is the Church triumphant, and those are the souls who are in heaven. And the third part are the souls in purgatory, the Church suffering.
Che durante la messa si rende visibile un'altra dimensione. Durante la messa,
During Mass, the repetition of the sacrifice of Christ brings relief to these souls. And when Mass is celebrated, the whole communion of the saints is present, and all the souls, and all the invisible reality. And so there you have represented this passage experienced by the souls. Through Mass, from a state of suffering, they slowly change their expression and their appearance until, through Jesus, they become the same as God.
Delle anime che prima da uno stato di sofferenza.
Purgatory is the temporary place of hope and purification of souls. It's the exact opposite of hell. It's possible that most of the Church is actually in purgatory right now. Praying for the Church in purgatory is one of the spiritual works of mercy.